The untruth of emotional reasoning is talked about in the book The Coddling of the American Mind, and seen upon our modern world and way more recently in the past years. This untruth causes society to become happy, sad, or any kind of emotion based on what is going on around them or with them personally. Emotional reasoning is the most damaging untruth for society, as it creates scenarios in people's heads and corrupts their daily thoughts on a daily basis. It bases one's emotions by what they are feeling and the situation that they are going into currently. The introduction of emotional reasoning on one's thoughts will be damaging in a larger scale, as research and multiple studies have affirmed that the amount of distortions that come along this untruth are multiple and will all corrupt one's thoughts and mental health in a very large scale. With no further ado, let's get into why the untruth of emotional reasoning and the distortions that come along with them are difficult factors and will, without a doubt, corrupt one's mindset and thoughts on a daily basis. So let's get to the studies practiced upon why emotional reasoning is so damaging to today's world. CBT is a psychosocial intervention introduced by psychiatrist Aaron Beck in the 1960s. It serves a purpose of improving one's mental health and focuses on challenging and changing cognitive distortions and behaviors and ultimately fulfilling the goal of solving personal coping strategies to solve current problems. Beck started his studies in the 1960s, and most of his patients were depressed, sad, or even with mental distorted thoughts. During the time he worked with his patients, he saw a correlation of the thoughts a person had and the feelings that came with them. Most people would say, "I'm not good, my world is bleak, and my future is hopeless." His discovery was that it was in fact possible to find a correlation between negative beliefs and negative emotions. The most common and hurtful distortions found whilst Beck was doing his research were emotional reasoning, catastrophizing, overgeneralizing, dichotomous thinking, mind reading, labeling, negative filtering, discounting positives, and finding. Emotional reasoning is the most common of all cognitive distortions. More people would be happier and effective if they did it less. Abusing this untruth is not healthy for anyone and will clearly create a negative impact towards yourself and your surroundings. And this untruth is finding a way to damage people's. I feel depressed, therefore my marriage is not working out. Having the power to make these certain decisions based on the way one's feeling is not healthy at all. The example shown demonstrates how easily people suffering from depression or a certain mental disorder can and will give a reasoning based on only the certain thoughts that they get from a specific situation. An experiment was held by Nayin Young and her crew towards a couple of people from the University of Gießen, and the experiment on giving certain people a test, and based on the score they just got, they would monitor the reactions of such. When the students were given the feedback of their test, the researchers saw the change of expressions instantly. Towards the climax of the activity, students that passed were seen happy, meanwhile the students that failed were quieter and more anxious. By seeing that previous example of how emotions take part in one's attitude at the end of the day, one can see how the importance of it determines one's attitude towards life will change negatively or positively. The untruth will create mostly a negative impact, as teens on this modern day can suffer such anxiousness and overthinking everything a lot. This untruth will create a problem to one's personal life, as someone that may be suffering from it has a much higher probability to be depressed and spending time alone. When talking about today's society and the rising young population, a slight increase of anxiousness, depression, and various negative aspects affect the young minds of today. In the book The Coddling of the American Mind, the chapter labeled Anxiety and Depression, a bunch of researchers of this topic show how it's affecting society and recorded a new amount of levels of stress and depression. In 2017, colleges were not the primary cause of the waves of mental illness among their students. Rather, the students seeking help were part of a much larger national wave of adolescent anxiety and depression unlike anything seen in modern times. A huge factor of this is social media and how it's affecting young. Social media creates a mindset in students that if a person doesn't follow them, they must think they are an ugly looking person, and so on, Great example on how emotional reasoning has such an impact on these young minds today and how it in fact creates a negative impact towards our modern day society. Use of social media, screen time, and all the things that have to do with the internet will in fact create a negative impact on these young minds. Studies have also confirmed that suicide rates to rise, mental illness and disorders all come with emotional reasoning, with at least 100,000 teens from the years 1999 and 2012 suiciding. Finally, we can finally see the affections and negative impacts that emotional reasoning has towards the society of the modern day, and especially teens. Having such a mindset and the causes that emotional reasoning has will in fact be not good for anyone. This in truth is without a doubt the most hurtful for this modern day. The amount of studies held by multiple different groups all show us how the truth of emotional reasoning and its great amount of distortion is creating extremely damaging idea in the young minds of the young ones in this rising society. Depression and some big factors that come along are corrupting the young minds today. Beck's research is a great example of how this distortion is in fact extremely dangerous to the human mind, as it mentions to the negatives that come when a person is using emotional reasoning, and how it will ultimately damages one mind. Beck also made it clear how this in truth leads to bigger problems. Emotional reasoning and the distortions that come with it are extremely damaging to the human brain and will not lead to anything good. So keep in mind that one can't let real life situations affect one's emotions and determine their happiness on a scale, as the result will not be adequate and will ultimately lead to a huge negative impact on their health.